now connecting to different networks, it seems. So I'm very happy to present our speaker for today, Dr. Eglee. Thank you very much, Eglee, for joining us. It's an immense privilege to have you with us today. Dr. Zent is a Venezuelan scholar with the expertise in biological and cultural, and specifically biocultural conservation and indigenous knowledge. She has been working for decades with the Jotï people on issues around biocultural and biological conservation in Venezuela, conducting research in action-oriented collaboration with indigenous peoples. And for the session today, she will be detailing her work on the recently published community auto-ethnographic book, Libro comunitario Jotï, historia, territorio, y vida, as well as sharing with us important context around her experience working with this community, all the different dimensions of struggle that you have been supporting for several years. So it's for us at L4E, Sicara, and the networks around here to listening to you today, Eglee. So welcome and take it away.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm gonna share today like sort of an overview of the kind of work we have been doing. I should first saying at the very beginning that more than theoretical, this or work in the Amazon has been of a sort of a very low profile. I'm trying to do the things following our hearts in a sort of a Latin way, sentir pensar in that kind of things. When you invited me to talk in here, I mean, I really feel really privileged, and I thought that talking about the final product, which is the book, one of the last things we had done, I should sort of introduce you how is that we come to be in the place that we are right now and why are we doing it. So I'm going to explore like in a fast way, like 3 topics that I think are very entangled, very, very close. One is like how we embrace the Amazon people and forest. Then understanding something that is probably the central message of the philosophy of the joti, which is jkwaini. We'll get into that probably more than you want in a few minutes. And then how we came to be partners, more like understanding the relationship of them, like a sort of like an upper or lower level in terms of the interactions. How do you manage to be just friends and partners? We start these things when we were very young, as you can see in there. And what happened? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No. Just there. Just okay. So I mean, we start, as you can see in there, like we're very young. I was a student at the very beginning, and we really didn't know exactly what kind of research or what kind of engagement we were going to do at the very beginning, and what we sort of had like our hearts open to understand the area that we were entering. My background was at that moment, I mean, at that very moment, I was more interested in the forest dynamics, and we knew that some people lived in there, and we didn't know that much about them. I mean, if you did a research, like a topic of the literature that was published at the time, we just find like 10 or at the very most 11 reference about the joti in the late 90s. And so for the first 4 months of field work, we basically were walking and we're trying to find out where they were with the first encounters that we had, were in many ways like a self-discovery of them and of us. We had like, for instance, like this absolutely incredible encounter, like people that hunters or like we thought that we were discovering them, but really they were discovering us in many ways. So at the very beginning, we sort of had like a humble experience of like realizing that the vastness of this centennial knowledge, that people that you might look at the beginning, like if they are like very simple in theory, are indeed really complex. So we were like at the beginning, like 4 months, more or less, like trying to mapping where these people were, and they were at the same time studying us. After these first 4 months of sort of walking in the Venezuelan Amazon, we decided to just selected 4 areas. 2 were like totally
Yeah. Can you hear us? I think your sound just went off.
Eglee, we lost you.
Hello?
Eglee? Eglee, can you hear us? I don't know what's up. Can you call her first?
You can unmute her in case she's muted.
She's not muted.
She's not muted?
No.
Okay.
I think you can hear, yeah.
No.
No, she's not.
And Ursula.
Well, sorry about this, folks. She did tell us at 1 that her computer is old, so that might be the case.
We can, yeah, we lost you last probably 3 minutes. So the volume is off on your end. So
I think that
Do you guys hear?
now we can hear.
Yes, we can hear you now.
We can keep, yeah, this, the volume on your computer, Ursula.
perfect.
On and
Esta probablemente
Hello? ¿No se escucha?
yeah, we can.
Yes,
Are you able to listen?
yes.
Hear now, listen, yeah. We lost you where you were talking about how they were discovering us. And then, yeah, so the whole thing you said about that, and then everything you said on this slide that says Sierra de
Hola,
Maiguanita.
hola. Hello?
We can hear you.
They can.
computadora cada rato, ¿viste?
They can.
Vamos
Es
a
que
hacerlo
sí,
a
yo
través
creo
de
que es
esta.
mejor usar la tuya.
Can you,
Ursula, your computer is fine.
we can
Just
use
put the volume on your computer, the microphone on your computer.
Yeah.
I wish we have some music. You know, when you're waiting, when you're waiting on the phone to
You can sing, so
have a terrible voice.
you have an idea.
Hello?
Hola, Iván.
Hello?
Mi computadora
Dile no-
no sirve, se desconecta del internet todo el tiempo. Es una computadora muy vieja.
Hola, ¿tú nos escuchas?
Creo que deberíamos.
You can't hear us.
Lo voy a conectar en la computadora de Úrsula, pero tienen que admitir a Úrsula. para que
Estoy
pueda usar.
admitida. Estoy admitida.
Ursula, we can hear
No?
you fine.
Hello?
Can you hear us? Can you hear
Hello?
me? Okay.
Are you guys able to listen what we say?
We could write like this.
I'm writing to her.
Okay. Okay, they are saying that they are able to listen. So you just use my computer and it will be fine. Bueno, yes.
Eso.
Um,
¿Entiendes lo que estoy diciendo? ¿Te parece que está bien?
She's setting everything up.
okay.
Let's pray.
No. En términos de que uno habla con una pantalla,
Yeah, it's
para mí
complicado.
esto es mucho high tech.
Yeah,
De donde vengo.
very complicated. Let's see.
Tendré que empezar otra vez.
Aquí
¿O?
donde está tu presentación.
Está en Vermont.
Aquí.
Y está la última. Lo pongo como PDF o lo pongo así
No, no.
para que no se cambie nada. Ahí está. Ahí está.
Ok, pero es un PDF. Okay.
Es un PDF.
Okay, hold on. Ahora volvemos al Zoom. Yeah, and then share screen, and then this one. Okay. Do you guys are able to listen? Yeah?
Were
Yeah,
you able to
nice.
listen before?
No.
No,
probably
you
no.
didn't listen. You
No.
did not hear anything?
No, right? No? Did you
No.
listen?
We did until the slide that says Sierra Maguaridada.
Did I start the presentation?
No, por el tercero, el segundo, el segundo.
Pero como nadie dice nada, no lo sé.
Eso, el PDF pasa ahí, empieza desde ahí.
Sorry. I don't know. Que ahora.
Okay.
Dile que se puede escuchar. Antonio.
Can you hear? ¿Nos puedes escuchar, Eglee?
I'm not sure from what point did you were able to follow me or not, but I'm gonna take over from here.
Yeah.
What I said before is that we started the context with the Jotï years ago when I was a student. And at the very beginning, there were like several issues that were for us engaged in a commitment with the forest and with the people. We had several encounters that were fascinating in terms of for us to realize how much they were discovering us at the same time that we were discovering them. And one of the things that struck us is, can you hear me? Can you hear what I'm saying? Okay,
Yeah,
now
yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Were you able to hear before or not?
yeah,
Yeah?
yeah.
Okay, well, since I lost some minutes, I just basically wanted to say that we selected, after the first 4 months, we were traveling and walking with some of them, most of the time getting lost and a little bit learning the language because they are not Spanish speakers or they don't talk any other language but their own. Right now, yes, after 20 years, I mean, the government and miners and missionaries and many people start arriving in there. But at the very beginning, they were sort of isolated. I mean, without wanting to know, to sound like I'm a Rousseauian kind of person. I mean, it really, for us, from the very beginning, being with them, is we had never been with people that had so much proud to be just people like them in many ways. But also, it was like a way of like, the way they live, the way they treat the plants, the animal, the sky. It was very different to many other contexts we had had. And so after these 4 months, we selected 4 communities for start to do like a more long-term research and partnership. So, I mean, or let's say of scientific approach is more related to what you might call ethnobiological, ethno-ecological projects. And so it's not that we were just doing at the very beginning, apply or partnership or cooperation. We had like several turning points all along the more than 20 years that we have been in contact, but from the very, very beginning, one of the things we really wanted was to try to help them to survive in their environment the way they wanted, to have total autonomy in the way they wanted to live. So one of the things that also like from the very, very beginning we had is like this hyper awareness of how much the human rights have been violated for Amazonian people, indigenous people all the world. So we basically made a commitment from the very beginning to follow the demands that they might have from us, and not just like conducting or research just like in any university or something. And so who are they? Just to give you a very brief overview. I mean, this is a small Amazonian group. I mean, there is like probably like 13 to 1400 of them. They are primarily like hunter-gatherers. They have a very shallow horizontal community structure, and they are very, very musical oriented. And so they have been growing. Their number has been expanding from the time of contact in the 70s, which is, I mean, this is the last ethnic group that has been contacted in Venezuela. And some of the things that we were doing, trying to understand how much of the forest they use and how they use it. And we came upon like with understanding that most of the time they spend it really, really in the forest. And so one of the ethical challenges we had at the very beginning is walking a path of agreement with people that we didn't know, they didn't know us, and we didn't even know where they were located. And one of the things is how to comply with the local norms, the local cultural customs, the regional, national, and international laws. It was a challenging thing after you find that they live in very, very different ways than we do. And so we basically have been growing with them together as individuals, as a family. And in many ways, I mean, at this moment, we feel like they are like sort of or family in many contexts, but also like this contrasting way of they use many of the concepts like nature, people, and even biosphere. It's like they don't use the same context, the same concepts that we use. So this articulation or hyper-awareness of finding a common ground has been always in there. And there were basically, one of the things that was absolutely important from the very beginning is to guarantee for them to have like some rights over their land. I remember the first times that we were talking to them about these kind of issues, and it's like, the main answer usually is like, we cannot own the land on us. I mean, it's this like common awareness that property over resources that we are used to call nature or ecosystem service of that kind of thing is actually artificial. Is a way of non-related that we are just one more that is in the universe. And this is something that for us was very clear from the very beginning. The way they move in the universe, in the cosmos, just state that. So one of the things like we wanted to sort of help them to sort of team up is like to be sure that their land was not taken by the government or any other institution. So there were like pretty much like 5 issues that had been all the time like underneath in our engagement with the Amazonian people. One is to try to help them to have rights over the land. That's very important. And it's something that in the last 20 years has been growing. I mean, like in terms of like the increase of extractive economy, the presence of the guerrillas, the military, the international capital. It's not like you're talking like with particular governments like China or Norway or the United States or Canada, that all of them are there. It's basically the international capital. So it's a big issue. Then the identity. I mean, how do you deal with the state or the government? They are pretty much like, many of them are dying right now from malaria or other disease. They don't even have identity. Many times they are denied the service just for that. So they are dying without ever being born in a state like mine. Then the language. I mean, this is a group of very small people. I mean, at the very most, there are 1,500 of them. So how to help them to don't lose their language and their way of being is a difficulty in communication in many levels. Then the health, which is a big issue, especially for tropical disease like malaria. And I'm sorry if I'm going very fast, but I want to just go to the really core of the issue that you wanted for me to talk. This is the context. Yeah. And one of the other things that it was very complex is the mobilization of this indigenous group over the last 20 years has been encroached. I mean, with the presence of irregular groups and armed groups like guerrillas and militaries and all these power issues that are always related then to the articulation of these of these indigenous people with the state or with other states or with other groups. The mobilization is every time more tricky, more difficult, more risky for them. So those 5 issues are somehow all the time underneath in our engagement with the Amazonian people. And so, I mean, after conducting research for several years, I mean, for probably like 5 or 6 years among them, and developing better knowledge of the language and developing a better understanding of their own concepts and way of being, one moment in 2001, we received a call from them through the radio, and the message, the exact message from them was like, every time you come in here, we receive you as our friends. Now we want for you to help us to build a map, to create a map of our territory, because we want to define our territory with the tools that Western society requests from us. At that moment was a very interesting moment that somehow the law in Venezuela changed. I mean, the law was passed in August of 2001, and in September 2001, we were there in the communities trying to start this self-demarcation process, but it was something that was actually a request by the community. So we went to their areas and we start to listening. What do they want from us? How do you want to do it? And we basically wanted to do with all respect, following their rules. So we exchanged the ideas, the information, and the perception related to the land, to the property, to nature, or biosphere, how we call it. And then we sort of understand the responsibilities that we had and the responsibilities that they wanted to get into this engagement. I mean, at those moments, the scope and objectives and the methods that we were going to apply were somehow defined in a plan. And we just start doing it. One of the main issues that was defined at that time is that we, as researchers, scientists, or friends from the outside, we're going to be just technical advisors, instructors, and somehow mediators between the society, the Venezuelan society, or even the Latin society, or the world society, like I'm doing right now in a way, and also their decisions, their perspective of life, or what they wanted. That was from the very beginning in 2001, said very clear. The ones who take the decisions is them. The ones who try to articulate it with the Western world is us. So we are in a way like a channel, and it was many times, I mean, they took decisions that we ourselves were not completely sure that was the best for them, but we respected. It was a community decision and we just followed the way they wanted. So we made for that particular project of helping them to make the map and make the Venezuelan government to understand that that's their land and what are the reasons that they claim that this is the land of them. So we made like 13 field trips, I mean, to these areas that you see which is not easy because, I mean, it's a lot of resources that we don't have, you know, I mean, we are not exactly like rich people, and my country is not exactly a country that is going to deliver money to do these kind of projects. And so the reason it took us so long was exactly because they did not want it for many people to be involved. I remember one time that we came here to the United States and we wanted to look for some funding to help us to make this demarcation project. And one person that we contacted said, that's very easy. Take one of them, take a picture of them using a computer and you can sell it to Apple. And so, I mean, for us was like a sort of a kind of a weird idea, but we went back to the community and we told them that. We said, well, we had this suggestion that if we sell a picture of you for Apple or something, I mean, what do you think? And they say, no, we don't want that. I mean, that's exactly like sort of like the opposite of more of the base of their ideology in many ways. In many ways, they sort of see more than us the risk of that kind of things. I mean, they didn't want to really engage in a commercial thing. It's more like really a cosmic connection with the universe. I mean, the jkwaini, which I put at the very beginning, is the core of their philosophy. It means basically to love and to care for everything that surrounds you. And they don't use money, as you can see. I mean, that's not the way they relate to the world of society. And in this way, to sell something to gain access to the land, it was just not ethical, proper. So we never did it in many ways. But we engaged them with the technology that they wanted to be engaged. In in many ways, it's like using the technology as a tool, as you can use a knife to make a salad or to hunt or to plant. So the technology was used by them exactly to build a territoriality right, a statement, this is our land. So we went 13 times in the development of the project to sort of like transpass to them the technology, to teach them, to orient them in that way. And 5 times, some of the leaders that they selected, the community selected, they went to our university, IVIC, which is the Venezuelan Institute of Scientific Research, and they're the more advanced guys. I mean, receive a further training in geographical information system, in GPS, and in different technology that was used to do that. I should say in parentheses that we were helping more than one ethnic group to do the map, but I'm going to focus in here just in the Jotï because that's the one that we culturally know the most. One of the challenges when we were building the map was how to understand the categories and how to translate that into a GPS or something like that. And the reason I'm talking about this mapping is because a lot of the information that ended up being in the book was collected exactly in this process of understanding how they live and why they live in this way, more than in many of our own projects. So this is like a translation of some of the categories, and it's the permanently chunk that we have as academics of Westerners with all these alterity in many times. I mean, how different they are from us and how similar they are from us, finding all the time this common ground in many ways. And I mean, different concepts, and we can talk at the end about these different things. So one of the things that was also like clear for us is how arrogant is science. I mean, they believe that science have the answers for many things. Pretty much when you start to live in there after a week or two, you realize that, well, that we should be more humble every time we adapt to that. One of the things we really wanted to be like a statement in the building of the map was like to make the oral narratives like legal documents. And this is something that for us was very important. I mean, this is a territory like many Amazonian areas in all the Amazonian countries. There is no like legal documents that somehow state like the legality in Western terms of the territory. So we wanted for their memories to be legal documents. How the memories, not just the narratives in terms of like mythology or in terms of like the ancestral cosmologies or this kind of things, but also their own histories. For instance, when you, as a woman, how many kids do you have? And they start talking about, for instance, a woman might have 8 kids, and you ask them exactly where each of these kids were born, and you try to put that in maps, and then you represent it. That's exactly a legal document of the paths that they are had. In the case of the Jotï, they have like different ways of settlements. They have one that is called Chonmue, which is temporary settlements. A person in a single life can have like literally thousands of those. They have another that is called non-mue, which is like settlements that might have like a span of like 1 or 2 years. And they have the other different settlements. So we were recording all these kind of things and trying to make of these memories of the path that you have over the territory, like legal documents of what you have been occupied. Even if you don't have like big settlements, big cities or big anything, you left your trade in there. And in the case of these people, it's even more interesting because they left like a tribe of wherever they have been, but they have been building diversity. They have not been destroying. So in that way, I mean, we were trying to record these kind of things. And so we facilitated the building of the map. I mean, if somebody's interested, we can go into more details. I mean, we sort of like, help them to first do like a mnemotechnic map of their territory. I mean, that was like located in parts of the community. And what they did is that they created like these teams of elders and younger people that knew how to use the GPS, and they would walk. To make a story short, they collected in several years 8,000 web points, and each point has a quite interesting history. I mean, this is the training for teaching them the GPS use, and this is something that Stanford. At the beginning, using these notebooks, which was Stanford came with the idea, was just to don't lose the data. I mean, Amazon is a very tricky environment. just if you fall in the river, you might lose everything that you store in the GPS, or like if there is a strong rain or whatever. So these notebooks at the very beginning were like sort of like just to don't lose the data that we were having. It was written in their own language, of course. That was a way also to preserve the data. And also, what they wrote in there, I mean, it ended up being extremely important because, I mean, one of the parts of the notebook has like the meaning of the point, and really has like, I mean, some of the database, like they themselves put into the computer, has like 25,000 entrants. So it's really like a way of like having like a bank of memory for themselves in the language, in their own criteria. So this is like teaching the use of computers. Also the development of the alphabet, that was another thing that came up with the demarcation. I mean, a group of people that doesn't have a language, written language. And so they were sort of like in the mission, they had been taught to use some Spanish and to use some, I don't know, some written strategies, but not in their language. So one of the things that we did was, I mean, create a consensual alphabet to write the language in the way they want. And that ended up being with a dictionary that was published by our institution and that has been appropriated by them and used in this kind of a school that is also somehow monitoring by themselves in the way they want it. And so this is pretty much like the background of why the book came to be the way it is. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk right now. This is the alphabet. This is just one representation of what I was telling you before. I mean, we have like around 75 life histories. And when you put like in with a GPS, the history of one single person, this is the kind of things that you come from. And so if you put together all the life histories of these people, we wanted for this to be a legal document to say, okay, they have occupied these things. Each of these kids of this woman was born in a different place. Each of these settlements where she was born or she has developed her life are represented there. This is a legal document of her life history. And that's one of the things we wanted to do. And so as an aside, thing that we didn't really expect that I was going to be fascinated is that they corrected the official mapping of my country. Many of the things that were not taken into account in the Venezuelan official maps were corrected by them, by the indigenous people, and was added to. Also in terms of the toponymy. And those are the final maps. If somebody is really interested, we can talk with details about this fascinating project. And then what happened with the book? This is the background of the book. And so now I'm going to try to share with you what it was, this talk in some ways. The book came after we had like this long relationship with them. I mean, this partnership when the real inversion of a role was clear for the Jotï as well as for us. And one of them was accused of something that apparently never should have happened. I mean, one young guy went to the city and was accused of raping a girl, and then he was put in jail. And then this was a false accusation. And so the judge, when they started the trial, I mean, it took him like probably 10 minutes to realize that the guy was totally innocent. And after half an hour talking with them, he's the one who suggested, the judge said, is that nobody in Venezuela really knows about you. You should write a book about yourself. They took this idea to the community. We didn't know. I mean, we as a team at IBIC, we didn't know about this thing. They took the idea to the community. They talked about this thing. And then we received another call from them. And they said, well, we have decided to write a book about ourselves. And we want for you to come to the community. So we went back to the community. And so this is the short history of the book. So there were, again, community meeting requested the book. A lot of people came. And so they had already cleared the content of the book, what they wanted to write in the book. And so we sort of developed it with them in the language, what it was the book to be about it. And it was a fascinating thing in many ways. I can just remember one of the things. And it's like when they put like the content of the book, the normal categories that we use in our society, like hunting, gathering, like, I don't know, like gardening, or all these kind of categories that we have in anthropology or even in ecology, they were not in there written. So I remember like I raised the hand and I said, why these things are not in there? And one of the answers of this young guy, one of the guys that is there in this slide, he's called Tito, he was called Tito. He says something like for me, it was very interesting because he even said it in Spanish. He looked at me and he said something like, in a very friendly way. They are very friendly. He said something, it seems like you have not learned a whole lot for all the years you have been with us. Because really the categories of hunting, gathering, and well, gardening, all these categories that are like the subsistence or ecological activities are actually encapsulated in their philosophy of jkwaini. So how can you pretend in Western society that hunting can be a law issue? Can be like, jkwaini means, as I said before, loving everything that surrounds you and loving everything that is as an entity around you. And how can you explain that hunting can be a loving activity if it's a predation activity? Well, the philosophy of their life implies really that when you kill something in this context for hunting, you're not killing to sell something or to make a profit. You're killing for subsistence. And there is a huge ritualistic way that is daily enhanced by them to show you that their awareness that we are in this universal cosmic dynamic together to guarantee the preservation of life is not made just about how can I say this, about not being aware that somebody died for you to be alive. In a way, what he basically was telling me is this hyper awareness that the possibility for us to be right now here, it doesn't matter if you're in New York, in Oslo, or in the Amazon, you depend upon literally millions of entities and processes. And that's exactly what you have to do. You have to guarantee that every time you do a subsistence ecology activity, you do it with compassion, you do it with love, and you do it with gratitude. Being sure that this circle of life keeps going and going and going and going. And so it's like turning around a different conception of things. So the funny thing also in these meetings is that we at the beginning tried to convince them to write this book in their language, but they didn't want it. Why they didn't want it? Because they wanted for this book to be read by the Western world, by the outside. So it was funny because they wanted it in Spanish and they wanted for a native speaker to write this book. Well, it happens to be that in this big group of people, the only native speaker for Spanish was me. So basically, I had to write the book with all, how can I say? It was kind of a challenging, but I knew that the review process was going to sort of correct or edit everything that was wrong in the book. So this is the content of the book, just in a nutshell. The book is composed by 9 chapters. And so it's like some of the things are in the language, but a lot of the things is in Spanish. And most of the book is in Spanish. We put it in English, so for like a Western audience. Basically, it's like the chapters navigate through, showing the history of them, the history of the indigenous Jotï, how they came to be where they are, who they are, where they are, what is the territory. One of the statements was exactly to show the self-demarcation process from 2001 to 2018, how it had been, and starting off is the government, of course, hasn't guaranteed their right over the land, have not given them the title. So it's an ongoing process in this sense. And so they also wanted to do the history of how the elder people live, how was that? And the first people, the origins of them. Then another thing is the how they do to survive, all these different categories of doing it. And also the ritual. The Jotï are extremely ritual people. Rituals are part of their daily life. It's not something that is sacred or a part of this. And then, different areas were covered. Areas that are associated with the way they deal with death and life, and also issues related to health. For instance, for them to be healthy, you have to be healthy, not just individual, but in a collective way. and they encapsulate it in a few words that is tiha tihao, which means, I mean, to be healthy is to be in harmony and in respect with the whole universe in many ways, with the different spheres of life. So, and so the book really covers like basically a range of issues. And what I wanted to share with you in a nutshell, for instance, is like, I finished writing the first chapter and I was so happy, and I sent it to some of them that were in the city. And then when they came, I mean, they read what I had written, and well, many of you are academics. When they communicate with me again, they rejected the first chapter. So for me, it was fascinating. It's like, why was rejected? And I remember one of them saying, oh, well, seems like you didn't understand. They didn't want anything that was non-said by them or the elders. I mean, every single word pretty much that is in that book was written and said by them. So it was a very challenging thing, because for me, I mean, I had to be all the time fighting with the Western categories and using their categories, but also using their words all the time. So we had a huge database, I mean, that spanned from, I don't know, 20 years of context. So sometimes, for instance, if they were talking about the narrative that say how agriculture came to be close to us, I had to remember something that was told to us, I don't know, like in the year 1998, and then I had to put that together with somebody that was told in 2005 or 2017. So it was not it was challenging in many ways, but it was absolutely rewarding, trying to respect the way they see it and the way they said. It was challenging, but it was probably, I had never been engaged in a project that gave me so much happiness in that sense like them. So what happened then is that we finished the book, and so we, well, this is the last two chapters is also how they are right now. Some of them, as you can see in one of the slides, are paying for government requests like military things, which at the beginning was just a strategy for them to understand the complexities of the global society. And well, it's difficult, but then the whole book is articulated as I say, this jkwaini base of their philosophy. Where when we finished the book completely, what happened is that we took it, printed to the community, and they were going to edit it. We were going to see if every single thing that is saying there, it was what they want. They are very organized. And what you see at the top of this slide is that it's funny. I mean, they make these sort of sketches of work. So Stanford will go with some of the I, which is like the wise people, and I will go with another group of I's. I mean, the wise people checking. They don't know Spanish, but the teams will be younger guys that are masters in Spanish, the Macana, and the I, which are the wise guys, the wise people in the community, and we will check every single of the 600 words that we wrote in there, or 600 pages, and to see if it was exactly what they wanted. And once the editing process was finished and they approved it, I was approving this nice kind of party assembly. And then, I mean, we were ready to look for money to try to print the book, try to publish the book. And that's what happened just in the pandemic. I mean, the book, even if it says 2019, that's when the book entered the press in Venezuela. But actually, it was published in the middle of the pandemic, which was when the book came out. And it has been extremely difficult to distribute the book because, I mean, it's been pretty much stored in the place in our country. And it's not to sell at all. We don't want to sell this book. We don't want to make profit at all. But we don't have money to send it. So if somebody wanted, they want it in paper. We just request for them to pay for the mailing, for the posting. That's all. But we don't want to make any sense in this. That was never the intention. The nice thing also is that the authors of the book is every single person that cooperated and was part of this. Most of them are, of course, Jotï, and it's like over 200 of us are the authors of this community book. And so what it was the hope is like a biocultural conservation in a way, but also like to contribute with the understanding of difference in lifestyles. I mean, eventually it would be ideal to try to translate this book in English, but That's something that certainly we don't have the capacity now surviving. I must add that when I was writing the book, I mean, we were pretty much, I mean, for the tragedy of Venezuela, I was like working as a laborer, I mean, doing other things and trying to write the book as we could at the same time that we could survive. Because Venezuela is a total disaster. So I don't make a living anymore like as an academic. I mean, we have very, very little dollars a month to do that. I just want to finish with a little reflection. The last project that we are engaged right now is a kind of a sad one. It's related to try to help the Jotï to don't die of malaria, as well as other indigenous people. In 2018, two of the most prominent medical doctors among the Jotï died within 10 days, and that really affected us. I mean, because right now nobody should really die of malaria. So we start a new project, or it's pretty much a humanitarian project, and it's related to try to get them like medicines, anti-malaria medicines, and also mosquito nets impregnated with these insecticides to help them to don't die of this awful parasitic disease. And so that's one of the last things we have been doing. We created this small project that is called Awapo, which is medicine in Pieroa language. And that's one of the things that we are doing right now. So in 2019, I was able to, engage with different NGOs. We don't have an NGO ourselves, but we sort of articulate with different NGOs to try to provide the help that they needed in this crisis. And with literally 100 people in my back, and being the only real Venezuelan in this engagement, and with the help of some wonderful Venezuelan doctors and nurses in a very low profile, I was able to distribute like 3,500 mosquito nets in different communities. It was kind of tricky, but I know without the help of a lot of people, I wasn't able to do it. I was just the face of literally many people trying to help us in this. Well, sorry if I talked too fast or I didn't share with you in the same property that I had shown this kind of overview of the things that we've been engaged. If we have learned something in this process, is one, academia can be also a tool to engage. We're not theoretical. With all honesty, these words of environmental justice, we probably had been doing that for years and we didn't even know that was what we were doing because probably we don't even have access to the literature from Venezuela, but I learned here not long ago that that's probably what we have been doing all these years. And so growing with the community and trying to understand that when you do scientific research, the same tool to understand the diversity of plants in the Amazon can help you also to understand how they live and help them to live the way they want to live. Thank you.
Hello.
The technology didn't help.
So I just was wondering, I wanted to make sure that Ursula,
Can you guys speak so we can see if we can listen?
can you hear us, Ursula?
Hello?
You can?
Hello?
No, we can hear you, but
Now I can listen, I think. Can you speak
now,
again?
can you listen now?
Yes, yes, perfect.
That's wonderful.
Wonderful. Communication.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, just gonna take the liberty to take my mask off. Can we do that? Yeah, just for a minute. Just place this a little bit to say hi to Eglee and Ursula there. Hi. Eglee is such a
Numbers here too.
on the crew there. Hey. Well, it's such a great joy to listen to you sharing with us such an inspiring process of co-creation and co-learning with the Jotï. This is an immense, personally opportunity to share some thoughts, initial thoughts about this work and how this is the core, it seems, of many of our questions and challenges as we engage in academic work with indigenous populations in Amazonia and other places. It's always this question about how you navigate different systems, different understandings of the world and knowledge making. And I think you have made a pretty strong case of how that comes about, how you can really make this work in a participatory fashion, how most of our assumptions about how the other understands us and our systems are totally dispelled. I mean, these vignettes about the table of contents and whatnot is a pretty kind of remarkable way to show us that, yeah, we're certainly in this process of mutual discovery, and what we assume about the other might not be there. And so just a few preliminary comments before we open the floor to the colleagues and friends to share their input and questions about your presentation. But I just wanted to pose one question, and it's about the challenges of creating trust and the challenges of building up the type of synergies that are required to conduct a work like the book that you have described with us today. So that's just one question to put there, and one comment, and it's about regarding this process of embracing the Amazon, the forest, and the peoples. Sometimes we engage the place through understanding, and you use the word embracing. And I think that is a very interesting way of teaching us how we can relate with the other. And I think the full emotional, and bodily, expression that embracing implies, it's there. And I think it's also related to this caring for life and how we are cosmological beings in that process of caring for life, either through academia or other ways of doing things. So the question about the challenges, and then we open also our colleagues that put together this, Josh and Jeff, if you have comments before we open the floor, that'll be great. So once again, it's such an immense privilege and an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So no, I don't know if Josh and Jeff want to step in, offer a couple of thoughts before we open up the conversation. If not, then we can.
Yeah, I think we need. So I don't know what. Maybe we didn't know who to go first. I'm glad to say a few words and so appreciate this fascinating presentation. It's sort of hard to contain the full range of my reactions. I guess I really was struck by this notion of mutual discovery. So in some of these settings, I love that idea of mutuality, even in that respect, when sort of maybe from the bigger world outside of this community, it's often thought of one way. We are discovering them, but no, they are also discovering the people who, it's this mutual discovery. And then what comes with what's on the different sides of that mutuality. And so I work on law and governance issues, and this idea of ecological law, which in many ways is a critique of the dominant Western system of law that stands, behind the discoverers on the sides of the settler, more developed community. And so there's a real challenge here when to break away. And in my own work, I think I have to constantly remind myself to put away assumptions. And I loved hearing from Eglee about even the challenge of translating, and what a wonderful exercise to have to scrub away and completely turn over that process to the community there that wants to tell the story in their own way. I just want to underscore the lessons from this work that hopefully can be drawn and expanded and reach out in a broader way regarding notions of power, of inequalities that stand behind this encounter. And from the settler side, I really appreciated the call for humility. And I think it's it's a challenge for settler governments, and not that Eglee and the other researchers were representing this. I think they were careful not to from the sound here, but we know, sort of standing behind, maybe watching our governments and other parts of that society, of maybe what's in that land that we want to get economic gain for, or whatever else might be causing threats to that territory. In the bigger picture, when we're looking at this point in time, all the problems of that Western society and Western forms of development and Western worldviews have led us to this call for humility, and maybe even some embarrassment and shame. We have in Canada these reconciliation processes, these with the apologies, but to carry through on what's needed here. And what I think the story we heard today sort of represents is the need to listen to the stories like this with so much humility and openness to learning better ways to have a relationship between people in the world, and to listen to how a central ethic of loving and caring for everything around you offers hope for the future in a way that a central ethic of accumulation, of profit making, of drawing economic wealth and power from the earth does not. Thank you so much, Eglee. It was really a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what you have done. Thanks.
Excellent. So before we open to responses from you, Eglee, there is a hand raised here, Eduardo Con. Please.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Sorry, I would normally be speaking from. I would be in the hall there, right next to Ivan, but I had to do something. I had a meeting here, so I couldn't go in. So, but anyways, Eglee, it's just wonderful that you can be part of our community and share your amazing work. I have two questions for you. The first one has to do. I would love to hear your reflections, more specifically about the Ecozoic community. That is a community that seeks to foster a transition to another kind of human-earth relationship. And the first question for you is how you see your work with the Jotï as part of that, and how maybe the Jotï might see themselves as part of that. Now, obviously, I think one kind of obvious answer is to say the Jotï do have a mutually flourishing relationship with the earth. I would imagine you would say that, and I would, seems to me from everything you've said that that's the case. But the question is how, as a planet or a larger community, we foster this transition, and how your work might be related to that. And it's a kind of, I think it's a thought question for all of us. As you know, obviously, Eglee and I have been in contact for a long time now. I'm also an ethnographer, and I think about these things a lot. That's one question. The second question has to do with this dichotomy between sort of practice and theory that was used a lot in the material. And just reflecting on my own career and work in the Amazon, I'm now, my research is very activist right now, very practically concerned with the kinds of things you're talking about in the Ecuadorian Amazon. But there are two places where that practical work has a special relationship to theory. The first one has to do with my previous research, which was completely impractical. I sometimes say that the only reason why I'm useful today is because I was useless for so many years. That is, there's something important, both as an activist, to be able to not be useful and learn and listen and develop ideas in a kind of more playful way that then becomes useful. And in fact, I don't think anyone in the communities I'm currently working with would ever have called on me if I hadn't had that very useless apprenticeship. That's one kind of relationship between theory and practice. The other one has to do with the fact that some of the activists I work with today are deeply theoretical. So they think of a lot of the politics they do as emerging in the world of concepts, which for them are a world of gods and spirits. And that concept work is a kind of spiritual work in that sense. And again, their interest in working with me has to do with that, the ways in which we work on things at that level in order to then, do things on the ground. So these two questions about the Ecozoic as a more planetary thing and the relationship between theory and practice are the things I would love to hear your comments on.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Pretty good questions. Well, the first one, I'm going to answer you with a little anecdote. I mean, it's in relation to the Ecozoic. I was really very happy when you contacted me. I mean, it's like, for the complexities, let's put it that way, of my country for the last few years, we have been engaged basically in surviving. I mean, working in cleaning room hotels, cleaning whatever, doing other things just to survive. And so coming back to the academia is a really challenging thing for me after a few years, but also a very welcome one. So when you invited me about the Ecozoic, I mean, you might laugh about this, but I saw again, I mean, one of the teachings of some of the Amazonian Kahonhate, which is like, in their words, are the sort of shamans or the sort of light ones that transform in something. When he was teaching me something one time, I said to him, but we don't live like you. I mean, saying like non-indigenous people, we don't live in the forest. We don't hunt. We live in such a different way. And he looked at me and he said something like, to love, you don't need to be anywhere. You can love anywhere. I mean, to love and care for everything, you can be in the middle of a cement fabric and you can still do it. That was one of the things. And the other thing he said, it's like, now go and tell, you know the language. So, because you know the language, go and tell them. And every time I'm invited to talk about this thing, I honestly see them sort of laughing and say, hey, you go there again to talk in your name. And so that's a way to answer you. I didn't know anything about the Ecozoic. I'm very happy now to knowing you, because like Geoffrey said when we were talking, it's like you're praying to the curse. I say, yeah, this is wonderful. I mean, there is all of you are already engaged in all these things that I'm probably just starting. But it's like how this thing, I mean, I don't even know how I was invited to come in here to the University of Vermont. I didn't apply to anything. I mean, it's like everything. I mean, if you really believe in this spiritual sphere that you're saying you're working with the shamans, it's them. In a way, it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I really didn't have any intention to come to the University of Vermont. I didn't know to the Ecozoic, but I'm very happy to know and having come in here. It's a way to articulate so much that, I mean, this that I'm going to say to finish answering your question is sort of like, probably has to be, and all the teachings of these Amazonian people find their place also in what you're doing, because this is a practice that you don't need more than having your heart open and really start loving. We wrote a paper very recently. The trigger of writing the paper were main two. One is because, for reasons that I don't know very well, I was invited to be part of this ethos thing, this platform that they are doing for the value assessment in the intergovernment this thing, you probably know more about it. And I try to include love as one of the strategies to create a new society. And the answer is love is not in Scopus. Isn't that funny? So because it's not in Scopus, we cannot include it. I'm sorry. And so in a very respectful way, it was dismissed, the message of the Amazonian people. And I say to myself, well, then we have to try to include it in the Scopus, so it start to be taken into account. But because we were just surviving, basically, I didn't write the paper. I didn't do anything until last May, when one of the last real teachers of us died. And so the day that he died, I said to Stanford, we have to write about these things. Because, I mean, it's so sad. They are dying of malaria and dying of these things. And so we wrote this paper. And just like 2 weeks ago, it was accepted. It was incredible. I mean, it was a paper written for the academia. And so at the beginning, it was just a small little thing, like a letter in this Journal of Ethnobiology. And it was reviewed by 7 people. I don't know if any of you have ever written a paper that has 7 reviews, not 2 or 3, but 7. And so none of them say it's wrong, but pretty much all of them say love. I mean, what has love to do with academia? And so it's actually pretty sad that you have to explain to somebody what love has to do with academia. Huh? It's like, wow. I mean, it's like, I don't know, it has everything to do with life. If you really understand love, not like in an erotic sense, or like, but it has, you might translate it with anything you wanted. You might change the word love with other things, but love is something that is understood by every entity. Even the microbiome understands about love. I mean, so I don't know if I answered your question, but I think we really need, I mean, I'm not going to say that it's the only tool to change or to make a new man, but I think we start to be calling the things for the name it is. I mean, why do we have to talk about sustainability and all these things? We really need to care. We really need to prioritize the things that are important. Money is not something that you can drink if you're thirsty. You need water. And one of the things that Jotï teach you is like there are some substance and essence that are shared by every entity that we, with all the science we have, are not being able to create, like water, air, or blood. You as an Amazonian know that these 3 essences are very important for pretty much all the narratives of mythology and all the narratives of Amazonian people as well. And in my case, for instance, I was struck for how important it is the nursing milk of a mother. So I hope I answered your question in that sense. The other thing, which is absolutely fascinating that you answer in terms of how theory and practice are like sort of separated, that's something that I myself that all this time, and that's exactly trying to fight with the categories that the indigenous people tell you. Don't separate these things. Everything is articulated. We separate it, we tend to do it. But as you said, all the useless years that you were probably working in these things are exactly what allowed you to be used right now. We separate the things, the theory and practice, but they don't. And I remember one time, like another colleague, that an indigenous guy went to visit our university, and he took him to visit the mathematics center, the engineer center, the environmental center, the anthropology center, all the centers. And at the end of the day, the indigenous guy asked him, and who is the one who put everything together? And he said, no, science is about separation. And so it's not time to put the things all together again. So I'm happy that you answered that because it's my mistake. We shouldn't separate it. But probably what I was trying to say is that I didn't know about environmental justice at all. I didn't know that there were so many people writing about these things and theorizing until just a few months ago when I was able to come back to the university. That's probably what I was trying to express. But thank you for allowing me now to explain better what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eglee. We have some questions in the chat as well before Josh and Pedro. So I'm going to read one of the questions that was here just a comment by Yesenia Hernandez. She said that this book is very similar to the biocultural protocols that I was facilitating with some indigenous communities in Oaxaca. We need to safeguard and conserve our knowledge, practices, and biocultural patrimony. So the question is how to do that without putting our communities at risk in case of sharing any critical information for those communities or regarding those communities. For example, medicinal plants and biopiracy, so all these questions. Now, she says, I'm wondering what is this border and how to establish limits.
Do you want to answer that? Yeah, that has been a challenge from the very beginning for us, because we, for instance, one of the things that we were studying at the beginning, understanding, was exactly the use of plants, indeed. And many of them had bioactivity. And for their own notion that the joti had, I mean, the creation, don't have time right now to go into that, but what you might call the more intangible part, the spiritual parts of a human being, are literally built with parts of the forest, according to the joti. It's a fascinating, beautiful process. And many of the plants that are involved, plants that have bioactivity. So one of the things we had done is that we had this need, we have played with the biological systematic name of the plant. We tried to put different other names, not the name that it is, to sort of disguise that, because many journals ask you to put a name of a plant. But also, I mean, we have some database that we don't share exactly to protect them. But that's a challenging one. That's something that we had to be very aware that there is a lot of people that really want to harm them. And so it's not a paternalistic thing. It's more like a savvy way to try to just don't do it. Don't share this, because it's really going to change any dynamic. It's probably going to trigger some ambition of Pfizer or whatever company. It's a challenging one. I realize that.
Thank you very much. Josh Farley. You're muted, Josh.
Yeah, I really loved what you had to say about the love, and how that was completely dismissed by the IPBS folks. And my own view is that in mainstream science, we often look at, if you can't quantify it, it's not worthwhile. And we distinguish between what is factual matters and what, the oughts, the moral values. And we say moral values have nothing to do with science. And I have to say that, part of this idea of the Ecozoic is to develop a mutually flourishing relationship between humans and the rest of nature. And that actually requires a radically different relationship with nature than our current one of monetary value and instrumentalism. I had just come from another talk on payments for ecosystem services, really saying, we've got to, show how standing forests have financial value and internalize essentially all of nature into the market. But I mean, my view of human history is that we're so cooperative, we can't survive without each other. What bonds us together into a community is the love, the moral and ethical values of how you treat each other. And that is what makes humans humans. That is what enables science to exist. The quantitative, we couldn't do that without our collective. And that I have to say, I think it's very unscientific to reject these ideas of ethics and morals and love is, outside the domain of science. They are the fun, we're social scientists looking how, societies function, and those are the operating systems of society. So I loved your talk. I thought that was a great answer you gave, and keep pushing at the IPBES to include some of these values.
I was not successful, I'm sorry. They basically dismiss, and they sort of look at me like in a paternalistic way, because I really never confront, but every time I was able to talk, I said it. And they just sort of pat my shoulder and said, oh yeah, that's nice, that's lovely, but it's nowhere in the document. So I sort of gave up, and that's what I decided to write the paper. And I can actually share it now. It was accepted, and it's going to be published in January. So
Great.
It's the beginning of something. I'm sure you guys have probably a lot to say about this thing.
And just one quick, I'm from ecological economics, where we view the economy as part of the global ecosystem. And the presentation I was just at was explaining how we could internalize all of nature into the economy. And our real goal is how do we internalize the economy into our finite planet. And that is where those, moral, ethical values and love and everything come in. But it's, we're focused on a radically different perspective. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in that talk. I hear the talk of him, and I really don't even know how to talk in those languages. I mean, I usually just shut up because I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's something, of course, I don't share.
So we might have some questions here at the McGill side of Peterson. Just wanted to give this group a chance also to intervene. Do you guys have any question, comment at this point? No? Okay. Just checking.
I have one, but maybe before Pedro's hand was up earlier.
Okay, so Pedro, please take it away.
Thank you. And thanks, Eglee. You never fail to get us to the crucial point. I love that about every talk you give. I had a follow-up question on the jkwaini principle or loving caring, and it's something you already know because you shared that paper with me. But it's thinking about environmental education and thinking about like how people come to be morally motivated to transform the relationship to their environment and develop a more ecological rationality. I was wondering, so one way of caring, for example, I care about my house and I've been doing lots of repairs these couple of months I've been here in Venezuela. And that's not necessarily an ecological activity, like setting up a new AC or like repairing the roof so that it doesn't leak into the house. And just like that, there are many practices of attentiveness and awareness about the environment, like say repairing the streets so there are no potholes. That are not necessarily connected to caring in the sort of way that I think the Jotï are trying to point our attention to. Even though I don't doubt that society would be much better if we cared more about everything in general, and we were more attentive. But I wanted to ask you then about the connection between jkwaini and the specific sort of ontology of things that surround people and the processes that we participate in, and how you think a conversation could happen, say, between the Jotï and say people here in Puerto Ordaz or elsewhere there at McGill, that could not only like highlight that we need attentiveness and care, but also point in the ways that our perception of what surrounds us might change, and might change in precisely the ways that would help confront the environmental crisis.
Well, I think your comment and question has is at the core of several issues. I think if children from the very beginning are taught that we are a collective entity, that's one of the things. Our society is extremely focused in individuals. And all these discourse, I mean, you wrote how I finished the paper, I mean, how we finish. I mean, all this idea of losers and winners. Since the very beginning, since you're a very little guy, you gotta show that you're the #1 in your class. You gotta show, we gotta revert that from my perspective and from the perspective of many indigenous people. That's one of the ways to do it. First, start to think about ourselves as a collective entity, not just like one, and thinking that whatever, if I'm okay and the rest of the world is not okay, it's fine. No, that's morally wrong. Not just morally wrong, but in the long run are gonna show that you are not right if not everybody is right. That's at the core of a lot of the issues related to the indigenous people. I mean, this hyper-awareness that we are not alone, that this notion of individual, I mean, the word individual means exactly that you cannot be divided. Individe. So, and for them is the opposite. We are divided. We are an amalgamation of a lot of the things. That's one of the things. So in terms of ontology, right in there, the thing about separation, about individual, it doesn't exist. It's more like a concept. And on the other hand, it's something that if you start teaching, as you teach the importance of money and accumulation in the school, if you start teaching about the importance of fulfill your needs, but not accumulation, I think the world is going to start to change. I mean, this idea that for instance, I mean, as you probably know, because I mean, I wrote a little bit about that kind of things too. I mean, one of the ways we relate to society is for the importance of you accumulate. I mean, you are somebody in the society as much papers you have, as much money you have, as much friends you have. that's also something that has to be reverted. This idea of like is not morally wrong. That I mean, why do you need 100,000 pair of shoes if you don't have 100,000 pair of foot, as the Jotï tells you? And that would be a conversation they will ask, for instance, to answer your question in that sense. I mean, why? Why those things should be prioritized? Why do we have like these huge campaigns of commodities every day that you go to the street or you turn on the radio or whatever mass media? These ideas are the ones that everybody wants to reach. We want to reach, I mean, the last fashion thing, the last whatever. These kind of things are not questioned by the society in a systematic way. And so that's an easy answer. We got to start to teach that it's just not right. I mean, it's not the things that are going to make you happy. If I learned something in the last few months working with some people in a very humble way, is that the richest people in the world, it's not the most happy, for instance. So these kind of things that are beyond the jungle, beyond what the indigenous people say. So if you start to put it in a language that is closer to our society, because of course, I mean, you see the presentation I gave and people's gonna say, we don't live in the Amazon. We're so different to that people. For them, it's easier. I guess it's difficult for every single human being because we're all the time in this struggle of considering ourselves global or alone. I don't know if I answered this. This is something probably we can talk for in a long conversation with a nice cup of tea or coffee or something. But it's just some ideas that trigger in my mind after listening to your commentary. He wants to say something. I don't know. He can say a lot of things.
Well, in reference to the question about jkwaini, jkwaini is based essentially on establishing social relationships with other species, and that process of establishing those relationships begins with the birth or even before the birth of an individual. When a baby is born, the father generally will go out and collect different materials from the forest, leaves and small animal parts, pieces of bark, pieces of the earth, stones, even water, and mixes all this up into a bundle, and then comes back and the mother and father will wash the infant with this bundle, this biodiverse bundle, and to form the spiritual side, the soul. Some people might call it a soul, spiritual side of the individual, which must start there for the individual to grow and mature as a complete human being. And these relationships with one's environment grows more and more over time. And so these effective relationships, the notions of caring and taking care of, not abandoning, come from forming these relationships. And so I think that would be from maybe a Jotï who goes to Puerto Das and is talking to someone who's from there, would try to emphasize that. And maybe that's one of the biggest challenges. It is through this engagement. It's not a separation, it's a contact, connection, engagements with these other types of beings, in treating them more on an equal stance rather than an unequal one of superiority or of exclusive right over something else, would be something that they might emphasize. And that really is a big challenge for us nowadays, where more and more people in the modern industrialized or post-industrialized, postmodern world live more more and more separated from actual contact and connection with the nature, with the environment around us, and with through what's happening with the pandemic, and as we're looking forward into the future, where we're kind of expanding our virtual environments and reducing our real ones. That's really what has to be addressed somehow, is how to overcome or mitigate this separation, as it were. And it's really a difficult issue, because you have people that are becoming more and more separated, more and more dependent on technology and intermediaries to receive the necessities of life, rather than having this direct contact. And so I think that's one of the things that might come from that kind of discussion.
Well, just to add up, I mean, I had the same comment one time in one class with this biology student, and she says something like, well, but we don't build or solve with parts of the forest, for instance. But if you reflect upon, I mean, one of the sort of like exercise that you can do with the students, with ourselves all the time, is how many plants and animals and microbiomes or whatever entities that if you make a list of all the plants and animals that you consume daily in one way or another, that's also a way to understand how much we depend on that. If you need really to make a case of that, we depend upon all the processes of what they have been called ecosystem service. But I don't know, we answer Pedro.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Eglee and Stanford and Ursula there, and everybody who attended this conversation today. We are really happy and full of love after listening to you. So thanks again, and yeah, thank you for everyone who attended. And let's continue these musings collectively. Un abrazo.
Un abrazo. Thank you.